Thank you, Dana, for being here with us. And I would like to introduce you as Dr. Dana Hawley at Virginia Tech, and you are the professor of biological sciences. Is that correct?
That is. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for taking the time to do this because I realize how busy everybody is with their day-to-day careers. And in honor of Women's History Month, of course, this is another reason why we wanted to focus on this topic. We at the Science Museum really wanted to highlight some local women making great contributions in our community. So first of all, I wanted to introduce you as well as making note that one of our exhibits here is the Microbes exhibit, which you have taken some time and effort in that. I didn't know if you wanted to give a little bit of background for that exhibit that we've had here.
Sure, yeah. That exhibit is a fun result of a collaboration, so a team project that I have with another woman scientist in my department who kind of came to me one day and happened to ask a question that I didn't know the answer to. And she basically said, hey, what other microbes are in the eyes of these birds that get this kind of pink eye disease you study? And I said, that's a great question. Let's find out. And we embarked on a long study that eventually got funded by the National Science Foundation to look into how different microbes or bacteria in particular, how are they interacting inside of different body tissues for these birds that we study. And this is a topic that matters for basically all living things because we all have microbes all over our bodies. So we were able to work with the museum, who was just fantastic at helping us put together this exhibit to highlight the important roles that these tiny microorganisms that we can't see are playing in our lives in all sorts of critical ways.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I can tell you firsthand how much interaction that exhibit gets and how exciting children get to see. It definitely captures their interest just first by the colorful images that we have in the exhibit. And it gives them a fun way to learn about all of that. And they get excited to use the microscopes. It's been fun to observe that. It captures their eye right because it's right off the entrance of the museum. So it definitely, they see that right away. Well, thank you for giving us the background for that. And we're so thankful that we get to have those collaborations with Virginia Tech here. Like I said, just, in the local community. And get started on the questions. The first one was, can you tell us about your background and how you became interested in science?
It actually took a long time for me to get interested in science in particular. So I didn't have one of those childhoods where I always wanted to be a scientist, didn't really have any exposure to science until college, probably. Grew up always enjoying playing outside, but I mostly just liked all the things that kids like, playing with dolls or making up worlds that I would inhabit inside of my head and with my friends. And I always loved animals. So I kind of assumed that the path to take if you love animals was being a vet. So I went to college thinking that I wanted to be a vet, but without really having a strong interest in science in particular. In fact, I didn't really love my science classes in high school. We did a lot of things that weren't my favorite. Dissections and things were never really the part that interested me about science. So I never got really excited about it. And in fact, didn't take any of the advanced classes in science in high school. But when I got to college, I was really lucky in that I happened to be sitting in a class my sophomore year, and a professor that had just arrived at my college came in and said that he was looking for help with his research. And I didn't really know what research was, but I thought, well, why not? I'm at college. I'm here to kind of try things and see what I like. And so I volunteered and got to see what science was and really learn that science could be a career in itself, which I'm embarrassed to say I did not know was really a possibility. And I happened to just get this amazing mentor out of that experience. And he really encouraged me to think about science as a career. And I always tell people, if you had told me when I was a kid or when I was in high school or even freshman year of college that I would be a scientist, I would probably have laughed out loud in your face, because that was the farthest thing from my mind, and not something I could even have imagined myself as smart enough to do or good enough to do, if that makes sense. So it's in many ways, it was a kind of a chance encounter. And I sometimes wonder, like, where would my life have ended up if I hadn't been sitting in class that day? So always go to class, because you never know what may come your way.
Very true. That gives me so many ideas just for representation in science. And this is why I feel like this is important for us to highlight, because just like what you mentioned, even a lot of our educators here have said, it's really important that they wear a lab coat, as the female or staff members here and educators here, just for representation alone. So, and this is why I love asking this question to the women that I've been able to speak with, because it's just so intriguing to hear their background, how they got there. Not one path is linear. And usually it's educators that inspire us. That's for me personally as well. So
absolutely.
It's very inspirational, because you know that it's really what you make of your experiences and what sparks the interest. So
yeah,
it's exciting.
True. That's so true. Exactly.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And the next question would be, what has been the biggest challenge you have faced in your career as a woman in science, and how did you overcome it?
This was a tough one, because I think many, many challenges. I think one challenge that I have faced is being able to be my whole self as a woman, and also feel like a valid scientist that's taken seriously. I think there's this tendency, because a lot of science is critique of each other, that it tends to attract personalities that sometimes can be trained to kind of focus always on the negatives and not always maybe treat others in the way that you might want outside of science, for example. And my tendency is always to kind of put kindness first, which I think is just part of my personality, but also sometimes leads to not being taken as seriously as other scientists who might come across with more kind of outside confidence or a level of critique that is sometimes thought to be needed in the field. And I really think that it's actually important to have this, huge diversity of people in science. So not just one personality type, but it's definitely hard if you are the one kind of personality type that you tend to see in your own field, and then you feel a little bit like, oh, maybe I need to be more harsh with the people around me. But to me, I think like a lot of the reason that I would not have gone into science or stayed in science was just having a lack of confidence. So I think being someone that helps build other people up as an educator is really important. And you can still give constructive criticism, but do it in a kind way. The other one that jumps out at me is just not being taken seriously because I look like a woman. And when I first arrived at Virginia Tech over 15 years ago, I was fairly young, and I just always got asked, oh, which student or which lab are you a student in? Or who are you working with? And this doesn't happen as much anymore, but I used to consider, dyeing my hair gray to make myself look older or more, worthy of respect, And the ironic thing is now I do the opposite because I have gray hair, but you never know which way it's going to go. But I just got a very sweet email from a student that I had the second year I was at Virginia Tech. And he took my class that at the time was called Wildlife Disease Ecology. And he sent this email not really remembering who the professor was, but said that he had spent all of this time thinking about this course, and especially during COVID, how the course and the concepts had really stuck with him. And he's a doctor now, but he really thinks about this sort of interaction between human health and animal health. And it was such a sweet email. And at the end, he said, I'm trying to find the professor. I think it was a graduate student. And I laughed because he was talking about me. And I mean, he didn't mean it, of course, anything by it, but that was just the sort of experience that I had for probably my first 5 years here, was that I was never thought to be or assumed to be a professor or someone running my own lab. So that part is it's kind of frustrating because it makes you question your own worth a little bit.
You've already validated how to overcome it in general. I mean, you've already validated, first of all, with representation, how important that is.
Right.
And that's in itself, that's overcoming.
That's
Do you
true.
know what I mean? Like, you're out of your comfort zone. But I think that so many collaborations in science come from having that openness and exchange of ideas.
True.
And
Yes.
so you're already leading the way in your practice, just by practicing what you feel is authentic to you, So
Exactly. I think, being one's authentic self. And of course, there are times when I am not living that to the full extent, but yeah, it's something that's important to me. And I try to kind of pass that on through my lab by, recruiting students into my group and helping make students feel like they can really be their authentic selves, that may be very different from my authentic self, but that, we can all be who we are as humans and work together.
it's very inspiring. I've loved doing all these interviews. It's been so fun.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Can you talk about a particular research project that you have been most proud of and why? And it doesn't have to be research, just any project or any event, I guess, or just any memories that that you've been most proud of.
I think for me, the best memories I have as a scientist are working with early career mentees who are just figuring out finding their own passion in science, and to see them light up when they hold a bird for the first time, a wild bird for the first time, is just amazing. One of my favorite things about teaching science is just seeing, you could almost see, I feel like, when the pieces fall into place in a student's head as they're reading about science or they're talking about an experiment, and it suddenly clicks for them. And I just love that feeling, that moment of like the scientific process really hitting home for someone. But in terms of research projects, I am probably most proud of the ones that pushed myself a little bit outside of my comfort zone, because one of the reasons I really love science is that I get to learn new things pretty much every day. And early on, I always loved learning. I loved going to school. And so I think it could be pretty much anything that I was learning, but science is super fun to me because we don't know the answer when we're going into a research project. And there have been a couple of them that have been really fun, just in terms of really not knowing what we're going to find. So the one that the exhibit is based on, that project was really fun because I had never really worked on these other sorts of tiny microbes. I had always worked more on the side of the animal, and a little bit less on the microbes kind of under the surface that you can't see. So that was really fun for me because I learned a ton. I got to learn about a whole new field and learn a lot about different techniques than we use in our lab, and interact with a team of other women scientists that are also featured in that exhibit, that just are amazing and bring their own expertise to the project. The other project I'm really proud of is something we just finally published, and just a couple months ago. And I'm proud of it because it took a long time to get this work completed. And I think one of the challenges of science is just that it's a very long process. So this particular research project, we started the project itself, I think, back in 2016, and then finished the data collection in 2017. But then it took until this year to finally get the project in a scientific journal, because we had to work through a lot of different analyses or kind of statistics to figure out what what was actually happening with our results in the pandemic. And I was homeschooling my small children through, for many, many years. So when finally this paper came out about 7 years after we started, it was really satisfying because I think it's a really neat research project, but more so just because I felt like persistence really paid off and that I had kept at it. And I think that's something that you just have to do as a scientist. And sometimes it's really hard. There's a lot of dips and there's also a lot of peaks, and, just kind of pushing through until you get that final product can be really rewarding, no matter how long it takes.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for that because, as you said, it takes a lot of your time, dedication, and patience. And like you said, very rewarding. And even as an example of how we teach STEM here at the museum, watching them, sometimes the outcome won't be exactly what you expected.
Exactly.
But how much they learn in that moment with how they can do it again and try different things. And it's inspiring and rewarding even as an educator to see how they maybe did it better or could have done it just different ways. So
right.
I think that says a lot with, like you said, the start and the finish of your research and all your hard work. So.
Yeah, just learning a lot from the process, because I think we often feel like it's a waste of time when we have to start over with something. And there's a lot of starting over with that study where we would realize, oh, we really need to look at the data using this totally different statistical process. And it would feel like a bunch of time was wasted. But in reality, it's like, no, we worked through it. We learned a lot and we have a path going forward, and it's all just part of the process. So it's all important, but yeah, it can be frustrating for sure at times.
Yeah, I love the aspect of science of just the variables and everything, and that can be exciting. So I feel like that can be the rewarding side of it, right? On top of having to get the frustration part.
Exactly.
So that's good.
So true.
Thank you. The last question was, what advice would you give to young women who are interested in pursuing a career in science?
Love that question. I would say be confident in yourself. I think I spent a lot of time almost dropping out of graduate school because I didn't think I was good enough to be a scientist. And I think so much of what we do in life is just about feeling like you can do it, and you can do anything you set your mind to. So believe in yourself, and if you want to do it, go for it, and don't give up. Even when it gets hard. The other advice I would give is to be authentic to yourself, be true to yourself. So if you want to be a scientist the way that you want to be a scientist, not the way you think you have to be a scientist. There are lots of different ways to be a scientist. It doesn't mean you have to be only single-mindedly focused on science and have no other life. I have lots of other interests outside of work, and I have kids that are, my whole world in many ways. And you don't have to give up parts of yourself to do what you love at work. You should be able to be yourself and also be a scientist. I think that, the more different types of people we have in science, the better that science is.
I'm just so glad that we're wrapping up the month with this content, because with all different interviews that I've had the opportunity to do, each has had their own different inspirational message, but with a common theme of any challenges that you find, be persistent, don't give up. And it's just a great representation of how, the three individuals that we had the opportunity to speak with, how each was able to make a change. I'm so, again, grateful for your time, and I look forward to sharing this.